Starting, of course, with the story that has dominated the news all weekend, continues to do so today, and that is Gary Lineker. Have you been following the story? Yes? So, the latest, you might not have heard this, latest is that he will return to the BBC after they announced a review of their guidance about presenters commenting on social media. So that's the latest, they're saying he will go back. Janet, the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, has said that they're announcing a review led by an independent expert. And until then, Gary has agreed to abide by the BBC's editorial guidelines, the current ones, until there is a review of social media rules. And they said there'll be particular focus on how it applies to freelancers outside news and current affairs. But at the moment, they seem to have kissed and made up, or is it 1-0 to Gary? Is this the
Well,
by the BBC?
I tend to think it's a typically British compromise with neither bloke losing face, because it was all about who was going to lose their face. And I think that Tim Davie saying that he's instituting a review of the guidelines is fascinating, because these are the guidelines that he only introduced 2 years ago, actually in 2020, so not even 3 years ago. So his own guidelines are now got to be revitalised and reconfigured.
But maybe that's because they've got so many freelancers, and the thing was, as people
yeah,
were saying,
has social media really changed that much over the last 3 years? I don't know. But one thing I will say is that nobody comes out of this very well. The BBC looks defensive. Gary looks cocky, if you want my opinion. He looks a little bit too pleased with himself, even though I notice in his statement there's no real apology coming out of this. But he thanks everyone for their incredible support, particularly his colleagues, for their show of solidarity, and then adds in, it doesn't compare to having to flee your home from persecution or seek refuge in a land far away. So actually he's kind of more or less repeated what he said in the first place that caused the initial row. And then he ends up with a little bit of obsequious crawling. I'd like to thank Tim Davie for his understanding during this difficult period. Well, Tim Davie didn't have a choice, did he?
But maybe that's just him saying, we've talked, there's got to be compromise here. We probably don't know, or maybe never will know, all the details. But the fact is that he has always said he loves his job, he wants to be presenting that, but, he has
Gary's great at his job,
and
I agree with everything Gary had said. I just think dragging in the Nazis was a bad idea, full stop. And it's very difficult because Gary's got a social media company. He makes podcasts. He's going to earn a lot of money from that. So if anyone's benefited out of all this, it's going to be Gary.
I have to say, Gary Lineker actually didn't use the word Nazis in his tweet. He said, reminiscent of 1930s Germany.
Yeah, but it invoked the Holocaust.
What the issue is not particularly necessarily what he said, whether you agreed with what he said. I think the issue was, should he be allowed to say it on his private Twitter account, his views, political or not, his views?
So when you present a show like Match of the Day, will the upshot of all this be that you don't tweet on the day you're broadcasting? I mean, how on earth do you come up with rules?
But then, whether you tweet the day before you're broadcasting or the day after, if the rules are such... Well, it'll be interesting because they're now reviewing the rules. The interesting about his colleagues, though, like Janet was saying, amazing support, like incredible support.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really great, for anybody in any job to feel supported by your colleagues and feel that you can confide in them and they'll back you. But I think, step outside the world of Match of the Day and media. If you work in an office or in a factory, in a supermarket, you would like to support your colleagues and be there for them. But in the real world, how many people can afford to step down and not go into work to show solidarity? I would say not a lot of people.
Yeah, because some of the people expressing support are very well paid indeed. Yeah. And they too have social media accounts and it all looks good. You're all on the same bandwagon. So nobody comes out of this very well, but I do recognise it's very hard for the BBC to tell one lot of journalists that people in news and current affairs, you must remain impartial, and in the future they've got to decide whether another lot of people working for them, sports journalists, can be a little bit more
That's, I suppose
free and
that's
easy.
the grey area, Brenda,
They're
isn't
not
it? It's
consistent.
sport. So you're saying Gary Lineker isn't a news presenter, he's not a news anchor, it's sport, and he gives his opinion, and, you know, therefore he's not a news person, where those rules obviously apply for impartiality.
This just reminds me back of, unfortunately, the pandemic times when everybody was in lockdown, everybody had to not do anything, and then football, which I love, let me just say, football was allowed out, you can do whatever you want, and it just seems that there's special preferences in the football circuit, which, you know, I should become a footballer to get those special preferences.
Instead of working on a stage where you were shut down for months.
Well, exactly. You know, and the one thing that I think that the BBC, if they're going to review something, maybe review how many substitutions they have that are on the bench waiting. Or maybe get some more substitutions. I don't know.
Are you implying there could be another Gary lurking out there who could have had an opportunity last Saturday?
It shut down. It shut down for, you know... And I'm not making a comment on what was said, but the fact that it's shut down and it's off air, I just think that's just a bit...
Talking of shutting down, I mean, you made this point when we were talking about it this morning, of that it's shot down from the front pages, the junior doctors' strike.
Exactly.
Started at 7 o'clock this
Why
morning.
are we not... Why is that the main focus? There is more urgent things going on with people who need care, and the junior doctors are going on strike for 3 days. That's affecting more people, and I think is more worthwhile of the column of the inches.
Are you...